Hello, I'm Bill Bixby with Community Bible Study from Greeley, Colorado. In this video, I'll be talking about John chapter 9. It's a story about how Jesus healed a man who was blind from birth and his encounter with the Pharisees. This teaching is divided into 3 sections, which I have labeled the crime scene, John 9 verses 1 to 12, the investigation, verses 13 to 23, and the verdict, verses 24 to 41. By way of introduction, I want to set the stage for this healing. John 9 starts with the 4 words, "as he passed by." This statement breaks into the middle of a story where Jesus had just previously left some prior situation, and in doing so, passed by this new situation. So where did he come from? In the last 2 verses of chapter 8, we read, "Jesus said to them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am.' So they picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple." Here we see the religious leaders of the day coming after Jesus with a bag of rocks, and he escapes, no problem. But that event is what immediately precedes this event. So in chapter 9, as Jesus passes by, then stops to answer a question posed by his disciples, then takes the time to make a mud compound and instructions for a man's healing, we don't see Jesus hurried, frazzled, or running for his life. We don't see him afraid or barely escaping, but he's calm, confident, and careful in chapter 9 to use this event as a vitally important teaching moment. A moment here in this chapter where Jesus gives an opportunity to see him for who he is and believe. My central idea for this lesson is in the form of an exhortation. We should take advantage of every opportunity Jesus gives us to believe in him. Let's look at the first section, the crime scene, John 9 verses 1 through 12. I put the word crime in air quotes because, well, what is the actual crime here? And who is to be charged with a crime? This all started when the disciples asked Jesus a question. In verse 2, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" The question comes from a premise that the world is set up in such a way that suffering comes only from wrongdoing. And it comes in a one-to-one, personal, strict, cause and effect fashion. This was a prevailing supposition that they had back then, which was not in line with the actual condition of the world. This question can be filed in the same category as a question often asked today. If a righteous and caring God exists, why do bad things happen to good people? It's based on the premise that things, good or bad, should only happen to people in relation to whether they are good or bad. And that God is somehow responsible for making all this work. This is a human-made premise that actually gives people comfort, as it tends to bring order to chaos. But Jesus states that the position is mistaken. Let's make sure we understand this from a biblical context. When creation was made, God called it very good. There were good people and good things happening to those people. And Adam and Eve lived in a paradise, a place that you and I would love to live, but we don't. Because sin entered the paradise with Satan's help through Adam, who chose to reject God's way of living in favor of his own way of choosing right and wrong. We see that in Genesis 2, verse 17. As a result, in Genesis 3, mankind, along with all the earth, was cursed. Bad things began to happen. So cursed was mankind and the earth that we find that through history, in our own experiences, sickness, disease, despair, broken relationships, destructive lifestyles, crime, corruption, poverty, war, and death. And everyone is affected. We find that bad things happen to good people because bad things happen to all people. In fact, given the curse upon the earth and mankind, a better question would be, why do any good things ever happen to anyone at all? That is, why is mankind still here? Why didn't we succumb to the curse entirely and become extinct millennia ago? It's actually a very fair question, and there is a good answer. Some good things do happen to people, sinners and saints alike, by the loving acts of God's grace and His love for mankind, and His works to save mankind through Jesus Christ. Back to the crime scene. What is the crime? In verses 3 through 5 it says, "It was not that this man sinned, or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, whether no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." The crime? Well, apparently Jesus had the audacity to demonstrate the work of his Father, specifically the renewal of life, the removal of the worldwide curse, the bringing of light, symbolically in a man who was born blind. It's just for one man in this story, but it's a demonstration of God's intent to restore all mankind back to paradise, a removal of all blindness, physical, spiritual, emotional, you name it. Jesus was sent by God to begin the act of restoring mankind back to paradise. That's what Jesus has shown by healing this man, and frankly, that's why Satan and his children, the Pharisees, and you can see John 8 verse 44 as a reference for that, are seeking to charge him with a crime and discredit him in front of the people. They may see it as a crime, but we can call it an opportunity to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and is here to save the world and you in it. We should take advantage of every opportunity Jesus gives us to believe in him. Let's go to the next section now, the investigation, verses 13 to 23. A crime has been committed. What's the crime according to the Pharisees? Not sure, yet they need an investigation, but it looks like unauthorized healing, maybe, breaking the Sabbath, or maybe just plain old everyday blasphemy again. But they need an investigation, and Jesus welcomes the investigation. Sure, find out all you can about this incident, and keep that bag of rocks handy. So here's a detailed investigation. I thought I was watching yet still another episode of Law and Order on TV. What happened? Who is this man? Is he blind? Who are his parents? Was he healed? Who healed him? How was he healed? Where's the healer? And just like an episode of the TV show Law and Order, we hear from a lot of different kinds of people. The neighbors. Some said yes, that's the man who used to sit and beg. Others said, no, he seems different somehow. You know, that's how it is when you become a believer. And as you trust God more and more in your life, you do change. But Jesus doesn't change who you are. He changes how you are. You're redeemed. You're forgiven. Despair is replaced with a new life. a tremendous weight is lifted off your shoulders, and you have hope, and you live in peace. They also question the beggar himself. He answered truthfully in verses 13 to 17. He gave them facts. There was mud placed in his eyes. He washed in the pool. He said he thought Jesus was a prophet. Then they questioned the family. The family confirmed that he is our son and he was born blind. And then they became afraid and refused to answer further for fear of excommunication. Clearly one of the most joyful days in the life of their family, their son given sight, but they were worried about what others might think. Imagine that. Here, Jesus performs a miraculous work of restoration. And instead of thinking, I wonder if he could do that for others. I wonder if he'll do that for the whole world. You know, the way the prophets talked about the Messiah. Instead, they think, I wonder what others would say about us if we talked about this miracle. You know, we have some of that in us too, don't we? Another group of interesting people are the interrogators themselves, the Pharisees. As you read through this chapter, ask yourselves, what are the Pharisees really looking for? Are they looking for truth? It seems to me that the Pharisees are looking for a way to explain this event without giving any credit whatsoever to Jesus, but instead blaming him for some crime. I've been saying in the central idea that we should take advantage of every opportunity to believe in Jesus, because in this chapter of John, we also learn that an opportunity to believe in Jesus may also be an opportunity to reject Jesus. And that takes us to our next section. The verdict, verses 24 to 41. They called the beggar in to question him again, but this second time in verses 24 to 34, it's obvious they would rather force their opinion on him rather than asking him for facts. And the beggar handles himself really well. I keep calling him a beggar, but he's not a beggar any longer. He should be hired as a church pastor somewhere. I wish we knew more about him. I'm sure he went on to be instrumental in the forming of the church. We don't even know his name. But maybe he's a lot like you. There's no better church leader than someone who was blind and now sees, broken and now made whole. A sinner who is justified by faith in Jesus Christ. The final verdict for this man is to be cast out of the synagogue. Why was he cast out? In verses 30 to 33 it says, the man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. In other words, what is more amazing, my healing or your inability to believe in the presence of clear evidence? You know, personal testimony of the work God has done for you is one of the most powerful forces in the world. Let's hear the rest of his testimony in verses 32 and 33. Ever since the world began, it has not been heard that anyone had opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. He speaks the truth. How did they respond? Verse 34, they answered him, you were born in utter sin. Now, why did they say that? What was their reason for saying this? Because he was born blind. You see, it goes back to the disciples' question, who sinned? And here the Pharisees must defy logic, saying, you're a sinner because you were born blind, and, well, we don't have to listen to you. But here he is, standing before them, seeing just fine. He doesn't even need glasses. Are they blind? Well, verse 34 says, they cast him out. That was their verdict, but fortunately, their verdict is not final. When you've been rejected by man, you can always appeal to Jesus. Jesus' verdict for this man is based on belief and in simple truth. From verse 25, though I was blind, now I see. That is true fundamental belief in the gospel. I was blind, but now I see. I was broken, now I'm whole. I was a sinner, now I'm forgiven. I was lost, now I'm found. I was scared, but now I'm confident. I was hated, now I'm loved. The effect that Jesus has on you becomes your testimony and becomes the truth. This belief is transformed then into saving faith. Look at verses 35 to 38 when Jesus asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? In verse 38, the man answered, Lord, I believe, and he worshiped him. This exchange was stated clearly in the presence of the Pharisees. And in verse 41, Jesus gives their verdict. If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, we see, your guilt remains. There's a great difference between being blind and knowing it and choosing to shut your eyes to God. Every now and then, Jesus throws down in front of us in our busy lives the opportunity to strengthen our faith. It may be in the form of a physical trial, a mental quandary, a difficult choice, or a challenge to our faith, or many other things. Each opportunity to believe may also be an opportunity to reject. With the help of the faith that you already have and the Holy Spirit which guides you, will you choose to take advantage of opportunities to believe by receiving Jesus, His Word, and His grace? That's my prayer for all of us. No matter what you face today, good things, bad things, that you'll see Jesus walking with you to teach you, bless you, and strengthen your faith. That concludes our video for this week. Next week, we'll cover Lesson 15, which is called The Good Shepherd, from John chapter 10. To prepare for next week, do pages 182 through 194 in your CBS workbooks. Until then, this is Bill Bixby with the Greeley, Colorado class of Community Bible Study. See you next week.